Nick Brown, welcome to the studio. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Liverpool. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Bit cold, but I'm good. I'm good.
Cool. This conversation will hopefully warm you up one way or another. So this is ripped off your LinkedIn, so we'll see if you still agree with it. So you're an experienced business agility coach working with both public and private sectors, as well as internal/client-facing engagement. You're dedicated to helping teams and individuals adopt agile ways of working through inviting leadership, teams and individuals to think about their work differently, confident in senior leadership engagement, as well as proven leadership skills across co-located or geographically distributed teams. You're committed to enabling and focusing teams on delivering better business outcomes while relentlessly pursuing continuous improvement. Is that you? Have I got the wrong person?
Sounds like me. I think maybe that's me a few years ago trying to impress people. Maybe I'd dumb it down a bit now.
To be honest, mate, I'm going to start off by saying your 3 blogs on Story Points are pointless. Probably from 4 years ago.
Yes, yeah.
I still reference them now.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
because
nice.
I think they are so well articulated, and every time I reference it all the time because I think they're 3 well.
Oh, cool. Thank you for
together things. So you wrote, I don't know how recently I pulled this, but right-sizing epics drives greater predictability, faster feedback, and reduced risk. However, it often forces teams to step away from their backlog to access the insights needed for better decisions. What does that mean? What triggered that post? What's going on, Nick?
So increasingly I find teams and organizations I work with that a lot of the times value it isn't really at the story level or the product backlog item PBI level. It's more a collection of those things. So in your organization, you might call that an epic or a feature, but a combination of functionality. And what the teams I work with try to get them towards is improving flow at that level. Because generally I find that teams at the lower level are pretty good.
Yeah.
But when it comes to breaking stuff down so it's, a bigger chunk of value and continuously delivering that, they struggle a little bit with keeping on top of those things. And a lot of the tools out there, they don't really encourage you to look at that side of things. So I'm very passionate about building open source things that make it easier for teams. So it just, plugs into your Jira or Azure DevOps project and generates the data for you. But increasingly I found that still means they're going away from their tool of choice, and invariably that means they don't use it.
Yeah.
So what I started focusing on in kind of last 6 months to a year is automating that stuff, because a lot of the data's just there in the API. And it's all about getting that information visible in the backlog, in the tools that teams use. So it's kind of, I would say, taking away the excuse for teams not being able to do it, but enabling them to be more predictable and deliver value more predictably to their organization.
Yeah, cool. Makes sense. I mean, going forward, I may remove the reading out people's LinkedIns because I'm about to ask you, and it's better to come in from you than for me. What's the sort of high level journey you've been on, like the helicopter view or the comic book version of your
the comic book version? I don't know if I'm super Nick, but so I started my career. I worked with a professional services company that was offering kind of managed services to clients, and that was masqueraded as the cloud. It wasn't really. So a lot of it was building hardware, building servers, putting them in data centers. And I remember on Friday nights being in a data center, racking a server and thinking, this is incredibly dull and boring. I want to do something else. Then I moved into kind of project delivery at Royal Mail, working in the e-commerce team. And it was just pure coincidence that at the time they were kind of starting their agile journey. So looking at popular customer journeys like track an item or find a price or online postage, and rebuilding those but using agile techniques or maybe some water scrumfall techniques, if you will. And was there for a few years and really enjoyed that, learned a lot. And then I wanted a new challenge again. I moved to PwC, but working internally. So I was working with a business intelligence team that's building different reports for the organization as a scrum master. Then the role evolved to coaching other teams as well. And then I started looking at the kind of overall technology organization, put together some ideas around how we could reorg that. And I got to a point again where I I was approached about another role, and that role was at Nationwide Building Society. I think that's when I first started coming across you, because someone I worked with at Nationwide kept liking your stuff on LinkedIn. And I was like, oh.
There's not many people from there who would, to be honest.
I was like, oh, he seems quite funny and quite original. And then...
we were there at the same time?
No, it was more... do you remember Richard James?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was him. He kept liking your stuff and it kept coming up in my feed. And I was like, oh.
The guy left February, March 2020, I think.
Yeah, that would have been before me.
Before, everyone got chucked out because of IR35, basically.
Yes. And then I was there for about 16 months. In all honesty, didn't really make much progress in terms of what it was that I wanted to achieve there.
That's where you started writing those articles, though, wasn't it?
Started writing properly, I think.
Yeah.
Before that, I was doing like week notes, which were just kind of, summary of the week and not really actionable content for others to use. More just working out loud, I guess you could describe it. And then from Nationwide, I went to ASOS and I was there just under 3 years. And now I'm in my new role as principal flow consultant at Thrive Partners. So helping organizations build the best digital products in the most effective ways possible.
Yeah, I made a note of that. So as of recording today, you're 2 days away from leaving that online retailer.
Correct, yes.
You've named them, so I'm assuming that's okay.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes people don't like name or not allowed to name them. After 3 years, so is this your product consultancy or is it a joint venture? I had a look on the company page and I recognized
very minimal,
some
isn't
names,
it?
but I couldn't work out whose it was or if it's anyone's or.
Yeah, so Paul Brown, who isn't related, he's one of the founders, and I've known Paul for years, and I messaged him a few months ago saying I was looking for a new challenge and if they had any clients that were looking for people, and Paul was more, well, I'd rather you come work for us. So, very small group of us, and it's kind of moving away from large organizations like I've been in the past, but I'm excited about what it entails.
So Thrive Partners.
Thrive, yes. 2020 Thrive, I guess you could say the year is.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, you're on it to plug it, so I'll link the website in the notes anyway. We'll get on to the other thing later on. What does Agile mean to you, mate?
I think in one of your recent episodes, one of the guests, I forget his name, I think he encapsulated it pretty well. It's kind of, for me, delivering value continuously or delivering potential
Matt
value.
Stevenson.
Yes. Yeah, delivering potential value continuously, I think would be the only amendment I'd make, because I think just because you deliver something doesn't necessarily mean it's value. Continuously improving, so always trying to get better, never settling for this is the most optimum way that we work, and not being afraid to take risks, and kind of saying that actually we need to change direction. This doesn't make sense. So I think if you're delivering value continuously, you're working in a small team, continuously improving. I think for me that is the real essence of what agility is at its core. Yeah.
Lots of clap. I'll be completely honest. I wrote these questions a couple of weeks ago, so I must have wrote this for a reason. And you've obviously read them because you gave me a few notes. What is data-based coaching? Oh yeah, and what does it mean?
I'm guessing you probably got that because that's on my LinkedIn header.
Yeah. No,
so database coaching, it's all about leveraging data to, I guess, explain the story around agility in your organization, and ultimately, as a coach, showcasing your impact.
Love that.
So it's, I think it's important now more than ever when you look at all the different layoffs that are happening in the industry, around being able to storytell around, okay, when I started, this team or this organization was like this. After coaching, you can have some of the qualitative stuff around, people are happier and say really good things about you. But also, a lot of people outside the team, they're focused on impact and numbers. So if you can talk about how you've reduced time to market or time to potential value, or how you've improved team happiness scores, I think it's a data point, and it's using that as the basis for coaching. So we've identified this data, it doesn't look great, let's do something to improve that, and then let's measure the impact of that after we've implemented the change.
Is that that's not a fair question. Do you think there's an accountability problem in the Agile community, Agile coaching community?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit. I think, what would I put it down to mainly? I think Agile kind of had its boom, and then overnight, project managers became scrum masters, or business analysts became product owners. And I think with that, if I was to be maybe a little bit harsh, I think a lot of people kind of crept in the back door in terms of, I'm an Agilist, and there wasn't really the scrutiny placed around, well, okay, if that person is high performing in that role, what does that look like? And in fairness to those people, a lot of them, they've probably been on a 2-day course where they've got a badge and maybe got some initials after their name. But they haven't really been taught as to how they can validate if they're actually having impact. So yeah, I mean, the main basis for it is that I think we need to get better at scrutinizing the impact we're having, but also we need to get better as to, well, what does impact look like in particular roles? Yeah. I think it's, there was a few months ago where I kind of got at a post on LinkedIn about someone saying this is how you showcase your return on investment in the organizations you work with. And it was a complete bastardization of the term return on investment. And I think that's where, again, Agilists don't really do themselves any favors. You can't repurpose a well-established business terminology to mean something else to try and show your impact. So you've got to think about, okay, well, if we're showing impact, what does that mean for my role, and how do I make it contextually appropriate? So yeah, that's kind of the main motivation behind database coaching.
Yeah, I don't know why people wouldn't want to keep their receipts either, to be honest. It baffles me when I say to people, like, we've, again, be relatively open, with our associates, we have like a rolling commentary document. And it's not for me to go to check. I never really look at them, apart from because I'm interested. And I always say, this isn't about me being micromanaging. This is about me saying, if the client comes and at some point or another, we have to justify our existence as an outsourced support, like, keep your receipts. Yeah. So I can go to them and go, well, this is the impact this person's having. Yeah. And sometimes I'll go on there and they haven't updated them since for over a year, and I'm like, why would you not want to show off what you're doing? Because it's going to make my conversation a lot easier, and it's probably going to mean it's going to make your life a lot easier if I can get you an extension. Yeah, it baffles me.
Yeah, and sharing that stuff publicly as well. I think people underestimate how much that can inspire others. Yeah, because I know when I started my career, I didn't have a clue about this stuff. No. And it wasn't until years down the line and I started getting closer to the source that I realized, okay, this is how I can do it. So if we can reduce that barrier to entry for people so that there's an accessible kind of source of stories where you can go to this and quickly know, okay, I've done this change. What should I be looking at to see if this change has had the desired effect? I think it would make everyone's lives easier.
Especially freelancers in the market. Yeah. As it stands today. Like, if you're being paid £500, £600, £700, £800, £900 for some people a day, you've got to be able to justify that. And not everyone will agree with that, and that's fine. I don't want everyone to agree with me, but you have got to sort of back it up to a certain extent, I think. Where do organizations go off track regarding agility? And in your opinion, what are the reasons for that?
I'd say one of the reasons I've seen a lot over the years is going agile or going the agility route because it's popular. Certainly, when I worked at Nationwide, there wasn't a compelling need for change. No. In the words of the CEO at the time, we've made an obscene amount of money this year. So when someone comes out publicly and says that, it's like, well, why should we work any differently? Well, it's kind of, if we're making an obscene amount of money, just keep doing what we're doing. So having the wrong motivations would be one. Where else did they go wrong? Doing it at team level only. It's kind of like they're a small component part. You can have a very fast software development team, but if your business case cycle takes 18 months before it even gets to the team, it's like, well, you're not really optimizing the best part. And then also I think it's certainly from a leadership perspective, it's applicable for everyone, but I'd certainly say leaders in particular, having the humility to say, I don't know, or creating environments where it's not that everyone has to have psychological safety, but there has to be an element of it in order to make progress.
And what does that mean to you, psychological safety?
So it's kind of where you can be yourself without fear of repercussions. It's certainly not what a lot of people think it is, which is where everyone's nice to each other. And teams that, for example, avoid conflict because they think conflict is bad, but that's not a high psychologically safe environment. So it's whether you can say and do particular things without the fear of repercussions, that it won't be held against you. So, if I was to say, I don't know how to do a particular thing in relation to agility, that coaches I work with wouldn't judge me based on that they would help me understand it and they would use their experience. I think certainly, particularly as a leader, I guess it's hard as well because you have to be seen to know the answers for almost everything. So when someone comes to you with a problem, you can provide a solution. So shifting that to say, actually, I'm comfortable with saying I don't know, and
it's big.
Giving them authority to make the decision because maybe they do have an idea, that's a big shift. But if you start nailing that, then a lot of the other stuff becomes easier, in my experience.
Yeah, I like that. Any others where people, well, not all, or people or organizations?
The only other thing I'd say is kind of when they neglect the technical practices that are needed for agility. So if you're in an organization developing products, physical or digital, it doesn't really matter, no matter how many agile teams you have or how many Kanban boards you have in the office or virtually. If teams can't get working software or working products to market quickly, everything else is kind of suboptimal. So if you aren't doing, basic things like continuous integration, continuous delivery, so where you can ship or you can deploy to production on a moment's notice and you know that it's going to work, I think you're going to be limited from an agility perspective.
Hello folks, sorry to interrupt this video, but if you have got this far, it would really help if you did subscribe to the channel. Because it's face-to-face, it makes convincing people a lot easier to travel up all the way to Liverpool to record in this lovely studio. So, like I said, please subscribe and thanks for watching. You mentioned the technical aspects there. Like, I would describe you as quite a technical person because the amount you go into the data of it, and you've just alluded to the integration of tools. Is that fair to say? Would you class yourself as a technical agilist? And how much of an importance do you put on that?
Would I describe myself as a technical? Yeah, I guess in comparison to where the vast majority of others in the industry are, I guess that would be a fair description. I don't think of myself as that. Certainly, I get some basics around software development and what it means to be good at that.
Yeah.
I think if you don't have any understanding of that, you're going to be fairly limited in your impact. It's not impossible. And certainly there's people that I've worked with that have kind of flourished because they've had other skills they can bring to the table. But I think you need to have a base level of understanding. And if you don't, then focus on building that. So, really kind of ask the team you work with to help understand it in layman's terms, because if you're then, handling wider impediments across the organization, you're going to need to be able to translate the technical speak to the non-technical speak. And you can't really turn them and say, I don't really know, I'd have to go back to the team, because after a while you kind of lose your credibility.
And the team love it as well. The teams I've worked with, if you take a bit of an interest or at least show a bit of effort in what they're doing, that credibility and that trust is like a cheat code to building rapport with individuals.
Yeah. If you can just say, can you show it? Can you explain it to me? rather than just
Can I have a go?
Yeah. Or if you can even, if you can click the deploy button, that's kind of like shows you're getting involved. So yeah, it's a no-brainer, really.
Are there any things outside of the Agile bubble which you draw inspiration from, like marketing, other industries, sports? Like where do you draw inspiration from that people wouldn't necessarily correlate with Agile?
So I think on my journey, I definitely say the wider data world. So, when probably 6-7 years ago, was clueless at things like Excel and certainly other data visualization tools. I didn't really have a Scooby as to what I was meant to be doing. And I worked with a data scientist, Tim Bayer, and he was telling me about this thing called Makeover Monday. Okay. And it's not as big as it once was, but it's a movement in the data visualization community where every Monday they would post a data set and a visualization of a chart, typically done really badly. And what the community would do is they would create their own take on the visualization and think of different stories that data could tell, and everyone would upload them, and then there'd be a community call and they pick maybe their top 5 visualizations. Yeah. And that helped me a lot when it came to understanding things like storytelling with data as a concept. So, I talked about measuring your impact. What was it like before and after, rather than just kind of showing, static data that can't show you a change over time. So certainly I think that if you're caring about using data or showing your impact, getting familiar with how to storytell with data is really important. The product management community, the product operating model is kind of all the rage at the minute. But it's not just about that, kind of the nuts and bolts of being a good product manager. What are the skills needed? What are examples of good and maybe not so good? And it's not that you're going to be coaching the organization as to how to be better product managers, but if you can distinguish between what's a good roadmap versus one that's maybe not so good, again, it just makes you more well-rounded as a practitioner. The world of sports, I'm a football fan and a bunch of other sports as well. So the only thing I think is there's so many sports analogies, it can get a bit tiring. What did I use the other day? I was saying about how kind of like the developer and tester divide that can happen in teams. And it's kind of like when work gets blocked, everyone should be trying to get it done. And I use the analogy of kind of like when a team needs an equalizer and the goalkeeper goes up for a corner, that's not his position, but he's trying to score a goal, defender's trying to score a goal. And the person I explained it to was like, I don't really watch football. So I was like, it's kind of wasted. But certainly I think you can maybe look at successful coaches and maybe learn from them as to what makes them tick, the different kind of techniques they have, and across different sports as well. So you don't need to be really interested in the NBA, but certainly there's NBA coaches, you could see how they interact with their players. I think I'm not the biggest fan of Man City, but certainly Pep's ethos of kind of like he doesn't tell the team how to put the ball in the net, but he kind of can bring the players together, or he used to until this season.
That's an interesting point. And this isn't a football podcast, but my friend is a PE teacher and his daughter plays for Liverpool. She's really good. And she plays for Wales in the 17s, I believe. But the point I made, so I sent him a text saying, like, is playing out from the back everywhere? Like, is that what kids are now taught? And he said, yeah, like from the baseline. But then I think if we're all, like, it goes too far, like I'm a Wrexham supporter. Caveat that with before the takeover. I watched that, they scored a goal the other day. Goalkeeper hoofed it up. Striker got it, scored the goal. They didn't. You have to be able to change if things aren't. You can't play out from the back if you're 2-1 down potentially.
Yeah.
And to relate that back to what we're talking about, you can't, like, if your scrum won't solve every problem, just like playing out from the back won't. And you have to still be able to adjust. Sometimes you just need to hoof it up and get it done.
Yeah.
You know, if the environment or the situation dictates that.
Yeah. And then I think definitely this is one that's become something I still wouldn't say I'm anywhere near a good example for this, but I think learning about different language that's used when it comes to interacting with people,
Okay,
and to a certain degree, kind of the whole DEI space, and understanding kind of, you know, just other people's lived experiences and how that can potentially impact the words you use. So one of my biggest bugbears is the whole people versus resources thing in the Agile world, and the amount of people that argue about how bad it is to use the term resource. In the grand scheme of things in the tech world and all the language that people use, that is very bottom of the barrel. And it's only until you kind of learn from other people who've been through that experience, because I'm a white man, so I've not been through anything like that, or there's not been terms used where it would potentially upset me.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when you start to see things like slave versus master or blacklist versus whitelist when it comes to things like IP addresses, I think if you can
Servant leader.
Yeah, if you can at least, you know, start to gain an appreciation for, okay, maybe that term I've been using isn't the right term to be using. Maybe I should be using something else.
Guys.
Yeah, guys is one. Yeah, guys is one. I try to correct myself and say folks.
Yeah,
now.
same. Someone called me out for that, rightly so. You know, on a during COVID, because it was all online. I kept using guys. Someone messaged me privately and said, "Can you not?"
Yeah.
And then from then on, I've just used folks.
But it's amazing, like how much energy goes into the people versus resources thing versus everything else.
Yeah, there's more important conversations.
And that is a big frustration of mine. Whenever I see it pop up every few months on LinkedIn, I'm like, really? Like, we're going through this again? There's way more important things.
But it feels like you're not allowed to have, again, we're two white blokes of a certain age. We're not going, woe is me. But I think you have to go, for me, call me what you want. If you pay my mortgage, call me a resource. I'm personally not going to lose too much sleep over it. But that's my story. People have their, I suppose, the right to be identified or called what they want. But there probably are more offensive things to be called that we should be talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Put the energy elsewhere would be what I'd say.
Yeah. On that note, how did you get more involved in, I mean, you alluded to it before really, but what was the trigger of you getting more involved in sharing content and sharing your views or agile ways of working or thinking out loud or working out loud, I think you described it as?
Yeah, I think it was, you know, if you can be putting stuff out there that will help people make the mistakes you made sooner or avoid those mistakes entirely, I think that's something we should all try and strive for. I don't believe in just putting content out there for the sake of content's sake. So there are some times when I go to like Agile conferences, you hear someone speak, it's like, yeah, but where was the actual learning for other people? It's very specific to you. Yeah. And sometimes I'm kind of like, don't just put stuff out there to say how great you are. So yeah, it's kind of, it was more just like I went to a few conferences and I was like, well, the stuff I'm doing in the minute, and just kind of getting into the whole kind of metric space. And I was like, well, I'm using this to coach teams. I can share stuff about stuff I'm doing, what I think is quite good, and then the other stuff where I'm getting it wrong, and what I've tried instead to try and improve that, and then learn from others as well. So, you know, not just a case of here's me, you know, either putting a blog out saying I'm amazing or speaking publicly, kind of like also saying to people, you know, after the talk that come up to you saying, oh, well, what do you use? And then maybe you can learn something there. Yeah. So yeah, it was just ultimately just tried to make myself better, and just learn from others. And I'd like to think that's worked, and hopefully I've helped some people as well.
Well, I rip your content off all the time. So you've helped me, especially those 3 blogs, which I will link in the comments. They're brilliant. I think, yeah, I'm not going to blow too much.
I think that's 3 of like my most read. Must be you just kicking it.
Just me sharing them out. Yeah, Northwest-based reader. Yeah, that'll be me. You're also working on a book called Flow, Value, Culture, Delivery, a guide to evidence-based agility, which you're working on and will be coming out in the next few months.
Yeah,
that's what you told me anyway.
Aim is to get it out by the end of March.
Okay, right.
So I'm kind of in the final stages now, just tidying up. And I was messaging people when I was on the way to say, would you mind being a proofreader? Got someone to do the forward as well, which is nice. I won't reveal who, because he might change his mind. And yeah, kind of the book is, it's stories of the last 12 years as to kind of, I think agility boils down to those 4 things of flow, value, culture, and delivery. And that's kind of, whenever I've worked in an organization, that's one or many of the things I've been trying to improve at different levels. And it's all about, okay, well, you hear this word flow, what does that actually mean? And then in the book, I talk about this is how you can use it to evidence your impact. Well, these are things you can look at. Here's where I got it wrong, and here's where I got it right. And again, it's kind of, all these books you read is kind of like, here's my new framework, and it's either not supported by empirical evidence, or it's how amazing it is. And I think there's more value in learning how they got to that point, because there might be something they're doing that you're doing right now, and actually you can learn to not do it and do something else. So in the book, I try to balance it with times I got it right and times I got it wrong, because I think it brings a bit more kind of credibility, and you learn a little bit more about me and my journey to getting to that point. So the book continues bunch of evidence of different teams I've worked with, and just screenshots or case studies that I've gathered over the years, to try to make it a bit real to people.
What's the cliche question is, like, what's the why behind writing a book? Because it's a lot of effort, I imagine.
I don't know if it is a lot of effort. I think if you're really passionate about something, the words come quite naturally. Well, I guess it depends how long you want the book to be as well.
That's a good point.
It's definitely not a very long book. When you add the charts in, it can make it a little bit longer, but that just fills space. Yeah, what's the why? Just to help people that are going through that kind of crisis as to how do I show that I'm making a difference, and rather than people just sat around guessing, or people focusing on what fun retrospective format can I do this sprint. It's focused on actually, well, how do you demonstrate your tangible impact? So when you're coming to your end of year review with your line manager, you say, well, actually, this is where I made work go faster, or this is where we delivered more. This is the technique I introduced, and this is the consequence.
So I'm assuming you've got a view on over-egging the themed retros.
Yes, certainly. I'm not a fan of Barbie retrospectives and things like that. I think mixing up the format, I agree with that, and sometimes having a themed one is a good idea. But I've worked in organizations where the Scrum Master community of practice, first question they ask is, what fun retro format have you done this time? Nothing to do with the impact, nothing to do with the improvements identified, the consequence of those improvements, more just what fun thing did you do? And don't get me wrong, we all like to have an element of fun at work. So yeah, it's just kind of, just I'm not a fan of that particular approach when that is the main focus of someone like a Scrum Master or a delivery manager. It can be a tool in the toolbox, don't get me wrong, but if it's not leading to tangible improvements in the way of working, you've kind of lost the whole point of this.
How would you run a retro? Because someone will, this isn't a question from me, someone will be going, oh, all right then, how do you do it?
Well, I think it depends the level of experience the team has when it comes to working differently.
Yeah.
If it was a brand new team, I would probably just do stop, start, continue, and I would just keep it very simple. More advanced teams, I like to look at things like team health checks and identifying where there's a trend in something not improving, and kind of force the issue as to, well, so what are we going to do to actually improve that? So bringing some real data to the conversation. Over time, could be looking at things like, looking at flow data, cycle time, looking at outliers, looking at what are the most common reasons why work gets blocked, doing things like blocker clustering, so identifying common themes around why work gets blocked and saying, well, what are those are within our control to change, what aren't, what we're going to do differently. So try to make it a bit more empirical for teams. So then, and it's not, a lot of times as well, it's kind of like some of those changes, they take longer than the next retro. They might take 2 or 3 retros to notice the change. But if you're bringing that data to the conversation, next time we're trying to validate it, what data to be looking at. So yeah, that's kind of my preferred approach. Keep it simple and try to bring some data to the table.
Keep it simple, bring some data.
Don't spend 25 minutes of an hour-long retro talking about what Game of Thrones character you felt like this sprint. Because I've seen that in the last few months and that was painful seeing that.
You do know that's going to be clipped.
I don't mind that at all. I don't mind that at all. I mean, a Game of Thrones scene retro could work, but an icebreaker should not be taking 25 minutes. And this is the problem if you've got someone that is not familiar with good facilitation and they're too afraid to step in and say, right, actually we spend too long on this, let's get moving. So not a fan of the themed retro.
What else is on your mind? Is there anything that I haven't asked so far, which you think I should have?
Is this me interviewing you now?
No. Just is there a question that I should have asked you and that's on your mind?
What else is on my mind? I think one of the more interesting things that's happening in the industry is this move towards what's been termed like the product operating model, and kind of
the Kaganification.
Yeah, and the people that read Marty Kagan, then that's it. That's what we're going to do. I think it's interesting the direction that's taken and the popularity that's coming with it. And if in a few years it's going to be the next Scrum or even Safe, which also seems to be on the decline. And I think one of the things that I would stress to people that are kind of going through that product operating model rollout of experiences, don't ignore the principles, because I think that's what makes it a lot harder. There's no playbook. There's no, right, this is how we should structure our teams. I mean, there's a little bit of it in terms of, the kind of engineering lead and potentially the delivery lead.
Have you read the latest one?
The latest one is called Transformed, right? Yeah. Yes. I blitzed through it in like 2 days. I've not read Empowered.
Yeah. So I found they told me a lot, but didn't tell me anything at all at the same time. And that's not because it's.
Have you read Inspired?
Yeah, I've read all 3.
So I would probably say that you're not the target person if you've read Inspired and not really taken anything. That's how I felt anyway.
Yeah.
I read it and I was like, yeah, this is cool, but there's not really anything massively new.
I've given it out to like leaders in an organization.
Yeah, I think they're more
I've bought like 5 copies and said, you probably need to read this.
I think if you buy 100, he comes to speak. I think I read that somewhere. He'll come to speak at your organisation if you buy 100.
I'm not forking out for 100.
But it's an interesting development. I hope it doesn't go that kind of mass commoditization and not really make any meaningful change.
I don't think he would want that either.
And he's very. What I like is kind of the forthrightness as to no, this isn't the model. Whereas I think other movements in the past, they've kind of been a bit quiet on that front. The whole kind of Scrum but or kind of the Safe world, and ultimately the goal is to move away from Safe. But none of the SPCs would ever say that. And he's quite forthright in his views, certainly around Agile coaches.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good thing because it's kind of like it's pulling no punches. It's like this is what you need to be looking for, and these roles they probably aren't the roles you're looking for, or if they are doing this thing, they're not doing the role that you need.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that'll be the interesting development over the coming years around how organizations adopt that, and then what the next big thing is, which invariably will be something AI related, probably. That's a whole nother topic. That.
What else? The classic question, classic coaching question. What else is on
What
your mind?
else? What else? Let me have a think. What else is on my mind? I don't think maybe the role layoffs in the industry and the kind of mass redundancies that have happened recently, organizations getting rid of agile related roles. I think it's very sad and negative for those people impacted. And I feel sorry for those people that have been affected, certainly financially in that regard. But I think it's a bit of a kind of a warning sign as well to people out there. You can't just be coasting anymore. You've got to really start kind of putting the groundwork in and showing how you're moving the needle in the organization. And I think I certainly would be thinking about, if I can't do the stuff at the team level, what other parts of the organization can I go after? So I know one organization I worked with, we had a largely waterfall delivery process, but we focused on applying agile principles at a portfolio level, visualization of work, limiting WIP, and we start to sort of kind of reduce time to deliver projects, working on less projects. So I think it would be kind of, if you're in that boat, don't be afraid about going after other things as well. Because I think you can apply degrees of agility at all levels of the organization. So don't be fearful around going after the higher level, because if you can show your impact there, that's quite a powerful story to tell when it comes to selling yourself to the organization.
Absolutely. What's next, mate? What are your plans?
Well, after this, get some lunch. But no, with the new role, it'll be a new experience for me, kind of working with different clients, different sectors, kind of all at once, rather than going into a new industry and that's the organization I'm in. But I think I'm just at that point in my career now where I've come to realize the things that I don't quite like in large organizations, things that I don't think blend particularly well with practitioners. So I'm interested in kind of, the different challenges organizations have. Some of it may not even be kind of agile related, it may be more product development related, and, how I can potentially help in that regard. And also kind of, selling myself a bit more and selling the organization, because, wherever I've worked in the past, it's kind of, there's been an incentive to use the agile coach you have. Whereas this now is kind of like trying to showcase what I can bring to the table, and organizations ultimately wanting to part with cash for that service. So that's probably the part about the new role I find a little bit daunting, is kind of that salesman side.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of kind of apprehension there as to what does that look like, and you get the people that message you on LinkedIn, you're just like, I don't want to be like one of them. So it's kind of distinguishing myself from kind of feeling like a salesman to someone that's more just, look, I can come in and help you.
I imagine there's people who are more geared towards that though in this new place, one would imagine.
Yes, yeah, and that's kind of...
So it's not all going to be on you, hopefully.
Yeah, and that was, I was very open with them in the conversation still up. That's what I feel is a weak spot of mine, because I've never done it. But they were more than willing to help with that, and that was ultimately, one of the biggest factors was it's back in an environment where I can feel like I don't need to know all the answers, and that's okay, because there's more experienced people around me that will help me. Rather than, more often than not, it's feeling like you need to always know or be able to set the direction.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm looking forward to it. I'm starting on Monday, so straight back into it as well. No real break.
If you want people to, want people to reach out, where, how, what would be your preference?
So I've got my own website, nicholasbrown.co.uk. That's Nicholas without a H, but I'm sure you linked to it.
In there. Not in the comment, in the description.
So that's where you can read my blogs, see kind of different talks I've done, and there's a contact page there. Primarily, it's LinkedIn. So DM me on LinkedIn if you want to have a chat about things. And also, most of my blogs, I put them on Medium as well. So, give me a follow on there, and hopefully I'll provide value in that regard. So yeah, that's kind of the 3 main ways to reach out to me. And no doubt I'll be speaking at some conferences in the coming months.
Perfect. Any final thoughts?
No, nothing really other than thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for making the trek up.
That's all right.
Right, we're at that time again where I go like that and point you in the direction of another interesting video with another interesting person. You don't really have to listen to me. I don't try not to speak that much, but the video will be around there. Nick, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.